Good morning, all. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Jeff IDB UNEP Crew Plus project team, I welcome you again to our Crew Plus Academy webinar. My name is Janelle Barrett. I'm the Program Management Assistant at the, I'm sorry, are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, my name is Janelle Barrett. I'm the Program Management Assistant at the UNEP Cartagena Convention Secretariat. We are on the regional one of the regional co-executing agencies for the project, along with the GIS and the OAS. Before we begin, please note that the session will be recorded and uploaded to our Academy website. If you do not wish to be recorded or be a part of the recording, I kindly request that you leave the session now. Today's training session is session 4 of our Block 2 Crew Plus Academy, with the focus will be on towards social, economic, and environmental sustainability of reuse business models. This training is offered through the Crew Plus Academy, a free platform that brings together in one place all training initiatives led by the Jeff IDB UNEP Crew Plus project. Its purpose is to provide a space for knowledge sharing of water and sanitation solutions in the wider Caribbean region. As we did last week, we asked you to participate in 2 surveys. The first survey, which will be done now in our roll call, which you can see on the screen in the chat and will be used for registration purposes. The second survey is an evaluation survey close to the end of the session. This end of the session survey will be used to register your full participation today, and will be the basis for the provision of your certificate of participation. Now we will allow you 2 minutes for you to fill out your survey before we begin. Now that we're all set, please let me introduce again our program facilitator. Apologies. Now that we're all set, please let me introduce our program facilitator and training expert, Mr. Gustavo Herrera Dieters. Gustavo is a water and sanitation specialist with a background in engineering. He has more than 25 years of experience in basic services in developing cities in several regions. So without further ado, Mr. Gustavo, please welcome. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Good morning to everyone. Happy to be here on the 4th session of this course. For the ones of you that were not present in previous sessions, on the first one, we discussed the global situation of wastewater in the world. We talked about the very good reasons we have to treat the water and prevent more eutrophication and pollution in our water courses around the world. On the second session, we talked about technologies for treatment and reuse. We talked about how to perform wastewater treatment and different combinations we can choose for different treatment trains for the purpose of treating wastewater. On the third session last week, we talked about governance and normatives and some international guidelines we can rely on in order to develop wastewater treatment and reuse project. On today's session, we will look at how much does it cost to treat water? How much does it cost to reuse? And the session today will answer 2 crucial questions. The first one is how can we determine the costs of wastewater treatment? So we will look at the specific methodologies and financial tools in order to calculate costs. And then, more important, we will discuss how to ensure the socioeconomic and environmental sustainability of a treatment and reuse system. So basically, my presentation will be divided in these 2 big important questions. And as before, you can always type your questions on the on the chat box, and I will stop after the first part of the session so we can take some minutes to answer all your questions. Okay, so let's get started. First, how we determine the costs of wastewater treatment and reuse. As I mentioned, we will look at some financial modeling and also some tools. First, we will talk about the net present value, and then I will explain a different methodology called annual equivalent cost. They are similar, but each one of them has its own benefits. Talking about the net present value, what is the net present value? Is the current value of a future series of cash flows, or they can be either payments or revenue stream. And here you see in the screen, for example, you can apply this to any project. If we're talking about wastewater treatment, then let's imagine you have to make an initial investment, in this case, $100,000. So that's like your first big payment, right? Your initial investment for building setting up a treatment plant. And then in the following 10 periods, let's say one period is 1 year, we will have smaller payments for operation and maintenance. Each year we will be spending around $20,000 US. So if I just add these numbers up, right, I would say, okay, if I was to pay the whole thing today, then I just add 20,000 times 10, that's 200,000 plus my initial investment. The total present value is 300,000 US dollars. So that's the cost as of today. And this is just adding all the cash flows, right? But since we have to take into account the value of money in time, in other words, an interest rate, or in that case, it's not the same to pay $20,000 today or to pay those $20,000 10 years from now, right? So that's why we have to take into account this interest rate or discount rate in this case. And using that interest rate, then we will figure out the net present value. So the present value, we just add the numbers of each cash flow. But if we want to figure out the net present value, then we're taking the value of money and time into consideration, and we need to use a couple of formulas for that. We won't get into the detail of the formulas because we can just use an Excel function or an Excel worksheet for that. So let's look how this works. I'm going to share a small Excel worksheet that we will share it afterwards at the resource section of the Academy, and you can also play around with it. Okay, I'll share the screen again. Okay, so as we were seeing before, let's simulate a project now. First, our big initial investment, $100,000. And then each of the following consecutive years, $20,000 every year. Okay, so we do that for the next 10 years, right? So here, in total, $300,000 as present value. But if we insert here 5% as our discount rate, we see that we get a different number, right? This is similar, but it's not the same exact number. So that series of payments, that cash flow in the future, as of today, is equivalent to 240,000 US dollars. So what is this good for? This is, first of all, it tells us the total cost of that project, because we're taking into consideration the initial investment, but not only that, also the recurring payments every year, which can be related to labor force or energy or all the recurring payments in order for this infrastructure to operate. So first of all, NPV, net present value, tells us as of today the total cost or the total value of the project. But also, it's very useful to us because it can also help us compare two different projects, like for example, two different technologies or two different treatment plants or two different cash flows in the end. So let's say for project A, I need an initial investment of 100,000 US dollars. And for project B, I've been offered a different alternative, a different technology, which needs a higher investment. Let's say it needs a higher investment of 150,000 US dollars. So if you consider this second project, in this second project, the investment is 50% higher, okay? But they promise that our recurrent costs, the recurrent payments will be less, only $10,000 per year. Okay? So if I add that up and I do the same NPV calculation, I can see that the total value of the second project is less. So even though my initial investment is higher, if I take into account all the costs in 10 years from now, and I translate that to the net present value, then I get 216,000 instead of 242,000. So this is what the NPV is for. It tells me the total cost of the project in time, and also it lets me compare to different alternatives, even though the alternatives might have different initial investment costs and also different cash flows in time. So this is an NPV, very, very useful. And this is the financial modeling you usually need to show for the investor or for the authorities of if you want to justify a project for the ministry, for example, or to the municipality, then you do this type of analysis. But there's another type of analysis called the annual equivalent cost that we will look at right now, which is very similar, but it can be even more practical for our purposes, especially when we're analyzing the financial flows from the perspective of the operator. So we will learn about the annual equivalent cost methodology using this example of a taxi cab. What if I want to buy a taxi cab and provide the service of taxi rides? Let's say I need to buy this the cab first, right? And I will invest $25,000 for buying the car. So this is my initial investment, and then I have to figure out, okay, how long is this car going to last? Usually a taxi cab lasts between 8 and 15 years, maybe. I will say, okay, I need to renew my taxi cab in 10 years. Okay? So my lifespan for this asset will be 10 years. So first we get a first number here. If I want to provide this taxi cab service in time, and I want my service to be sustainable in time, I want to provide this service forever, it means that every 10 years I need to replace this car, right? So if I divide my total investment cost by 10, I get $2,500 per year. So in other words, I need to raise or save $2,500 every year. So in 10 years, when my taxi cab is old, I can replace this asset with a new one. Right? So that's my first cost, and we call it capital maintenance or CapEx. Right? So CapEx is the word we usually use for this. CapEx is how much money I need to maintain all my assets in time in order to replace these assets in time, to pay them for. Then I need to operate that cab. So I need to spend some money in maintenance cost, maybe around $2,000 per year, if everything goes right. Then I have to pay for gas, maybe about 3 times the maintenance cost, let's say $6,000 per year for gas, for diesel or whatever I use. And then I have to hire a driver to operate this cab for me. So as part of my business, I need to hire someone, and maybe I will pay around $10,000 per year to my driver. So here I get a second number. Is the sum of all my recurring costs. Is the sum of all regular maintenance costs, labor, driver, gasoline, energy, everything. So this cost is recurring every year. And we call this OPEX, operational expenditures. Okay, so $18,000 per year. So remember, I need to raise $2,500 per year in order to maintain my capital investment. And on the other hand, I need $18,000 per year in order to operate and maintain the service. So in total, I need to raise $20,500 per year in order to run this cab forever, to provide this service forever on a sustainable manner from the financial perspective. So this is my total annual cost, right? And we call this the annual equivalent cost. Okay. And of course, if we want to take into account the cost of money in time, then we need this interest rate as before. And notice that when I include the interest rate, my running costs are the same, but the money I have to save every year in order to replace my assets has changed, has gone from 2,500 before to over $3,000 per year, right? So this is very important. So we're taking into account the cost of money. Once we have included the interest rate, then we do have the annual equivalent cost. So here's the big difference with the previous methodology. On the NPV, net present value, we have the total value of the project on year 0. Under this other methodology, annual equivalent cost, which actually I like better for our purposes of providing services, I don't end up with a number saying, okay, this is how many millions my project cost today, but I get to a very interesting number that tells me how much does it cost every year, right? And I say this is very useful because if I know that I need $21,000 per year in order for this service to run, then I can figure out how I can manage to raise this money every year. Yeah, so this is on a yearly basis, but if I know how many kilometers or miles I'm going to drive every year, let's say 150 kilometers per day for 300 days a year, something like that. Okay, that means every year I'll be driving and riding 45,000 kilometers. So if I divide this yearly cost by my number of kilometers driven on the same year, then I get my cost per kilometer, right? So this total cost of investing and operating something, in this case a taxi cab, I can boil that down, all those numbers, I can boil it down to just 47 cents of a dollar per kilometer. So think about how useful this is in order for me to run this business. Then if I know this number, then I can charge 47 cents of a dollar per kilometer to my customers, to my passengers. And I will know that with that kind of income stream, or revenue stream, I will be able to cover the investment cost and also all the operational and maintenance cost. So number one, we have determined the cost of this specific service. And number two, we can also compare to a different alternative, to a different taxi cab, or to a bus, or to another technology, or the electric car instead of a car that uses petroleum. So let's say I buy a different car. Instead of investing $25,000, I will invest in a more expensive car that costs $5,000 more, $30,000 in total. But it's a better car. It'll last a little bit longer too. So this car maybe it will last 15 years. Right? So as you can see, if this second asset, this second alternative, in this case is more expensive, but it lasts longer, so my total annual cost is less, at least on the capex side. So I need less money per year in order to maintain my assets in this case, because even though it's a little bit more expensive, it will last many more years. So let's say for O&M, we're paying the same on this other car. So in this case, the difference is basically on the initial investment, but my total annual cost is still a little bit less than my first alternative. And on the total cost per kilometer, you can also see that this is reflected. It's 1 cent less per kilometer that I can charge for this second alternative. So it's an optimized alternative, right? This is something that it would be desirable. Okay, so this is the second methodology, the annual equivalent cost. And this is the methodology I suggest, I recommend for finding out, for calculating the costs of treatment services and reuse activities. So let me go back to the presentation. Okay, so we have looked at net present value, and we have seen the example of the taxi cab. And what we're learning is that we have to look at all the costs involved in the system and in running the service. On the left side of the screen, we have the CapEx. Basically, includes treatment plant components, reuse system components, pumping, transport, distribution. So all the money I have to invest in tanks, in pipes, in relining, all that goes to CapEx, my investment. And on the right side, you have all the OpEx, all the recurring costs, wages, labor costs, energy, chemicals, inputs, routine maintenance, and rentals for my daily operations. So here we have an example of an actual treatment plant. So on the left side, we have all the CapEx detail, pumping stations, pipes, sludge drying beds, hydraulic installations, lab, the lab, if I need a lab there maybe. So for each of these components of my treatment plant, I have the investment cost of that component, of that specific component. And then on the next column, we have the lifespan of that specific component. For example, pumps. This is my cost for pumps, and a pump will last about 5 years. So it's important to include the lifespan for each component, because that will let us calculate the annual cost on a component by component basis, and then end up with our total cost. So first, the first number we get out of this cost analysis is my total investment cost. In this case, this is a treatment plant for domestic wastewater with a capacity of 10,000 people. And in order to build this plant, I need an initial investment of about $500,000. When I do the annualized cost, the annual equivalent cost, this initial investment of $500,000 will translate to $22,000 per year. So in order to keep and maintain these assets, I need to raise $20,000 per year. On the right side of the tool of this spreadsheet, I have the OPEX, all the recurring costs. So I have to pay some technicians, operators, maintain the electric equipment, pump out the sludge. I need some gasoline for something. I even need clean water for my treatment plant in order to wash things, etc. Maybe protection for the workers, monitoring. So all the recurring costs, they might be monthly costs, daily costs, yearly costs, are on the right side of this spreadsheet. And notice that every year we will need around 21,000 US dollars in order to cover all the recurring costs. So annual equivalent cost is $20,000 for maintaining my assets and my capital, investment in time, and around $20,000 for operational and maintenance, operations and maintenance. As we did with the taxi cab example, we divided by the miles driven or by the kilometers driven. In this case, this plant will treat 270,000 cubic meters of wastewater per year. So if I divide this total cost by the number of treated cubic meters of wastewater, then I will get 16 cents of a dollar per cubic meter. Very useful figure, because if I'm going to do some reuse and maybe I will sell this water to the farmers for irrigation, then I can ask them to pay at least 16 cents of a dollar so I can cover my cost, 16 cents of a dollar per cubic meter. Or I can divide my total annual equivalent cost. I can divide by the number of people I'm serving. If I see it from the utility perspective and I want to charge a sewer tariff, then I can divide this total cost by the number of users or customers, and then I get to this number, $4 US per capita per year. So $4 US per capita per year, if I charge this to 10,000 people, then I can cover all my costs. Out of those $4, $2 go to CapEx and $2 go to OpEx. And finally, we have here the cost per cubic meter. So that's how this works. And if we compare this cost analysis for sanitation is with other sectors, there's a huge difference when we talk about energy, for example. And you go into the internet and look in Google or whatever, how much is the international price of the drum of petroleum, or the liter of gas oil, or the kilowatt hour of solar energy, or the kilowatt hour of energy produced using gas. All those numbers are there. They are widely known. They are widely studied. There are international standards for that. But that doesn't happen on the sanitation side. Costs vary a lot. Final prices vary even more from one place to another. And this is because of several reasons. For example, usually sanitation is highly subsidized. So sewers are highly subsidized. When you look at a cost database, for example, from the World Bank or from the IDB, you may find huge difference for the cost of sewers, for example. You can go from maybe $40 per capita as an investment cost to maybe 2,000 or even more. And this is because users are not usually paying the real costs, and also because we're talking about costs of complex systems, right? Here, what you see on the screen is the cost analysis of a treatment plant, right? But for a sewer service to work, you need, first of all, a toilet at home. Then you need the household connection. Then you need the whole sewer system, the pipe sewer system. Then you need the treatment plant that you're looking at. And then you might have, or maybe not, a reuse activity, right? So you have to perform this analysis for each and every step and add all those costs in order to calculate the total cost of the sewer service. And since we have, since part of this is being paid by the user at home, for example, investing in their own toilet, and then the municipality is paying for the sewer, and then some utilities paying for the treatment, then that makes things sometimes a little bit complicated. And that's why all these costs are not readily available or not as well known or as standardized as other sectors. So in the following slides, some numbers from a study I did in Bolivia of different treatment technologies, small plants, large plants. On the left side, you see the on-site, very small septic tank type of treatment. And on the right side, you see the medium and larger treatment plants. In this case, we're looking at investment costs. And you can see that basically investment costs for a treatment plant go from 45 to 100 US dollars per capita, per person, per inhabitant. If we look at the annual equivalent cost, which is what we've been calculating today, we can see that the annual equivalent cost goes from 5 to 12 US dollars per capita per year, right? So first we have the investment, now we have the yearly cost. So we're looking at just a ranges. On the left side, basic treatment, just primary and basic secondary treatment. And on the right side, we have advanced secondary or tertiary treatment in which we are removing nitrogen and phosphorus. So of course, when we do a more advanced treatment, the range of cost will be higher. The more advanced the treatment, the higher the cost. And here are the costs of 1 cubic meter of treated water. Again, these costs include the investment cost and all the operation costs, all the costs. So here we have a range that goes from 12 cents of a dollar to 36 cents of a dollar. Again, on the left column, it's more of a basic treatment. On the right column, more of an advanced treatment. Which is also interesting to look at is to compare the treatment costs of wastewater to the total cost of water and sanitation costs. So if you look at the first column on the left, the blue part is the cost of treating wastewater. But the total column is the cost of producing water, distributing water, collecting wastewater, and treating water. So if the total cost is around $320 per capita as an investment cost, then we can see that the treatment part, the investment cost for treating wastewater is only about 20% of the total cost. So from all the money we need to invest for water and sanitation services, only about 20% is needed for treating wastewater, and 80% is for potable water and collecting wastewater. That's where most of, 80% of the money goes to. So in other words, the investment for treatment plants is not as big, it's not that big. Nevertheless, worldwide we're treating properly less than 10% of wastewater because we're lacking that infrastructure for treatment. Okay, so as I mentioned before, it's not only about treating. Treatment is one step of the sanitation value chain, but we have all the preceding steps as well, right? The interface containment, such as toilets at home or a septic tank. Collection transport services might be different. When we talk about sewers, we have the pipes for collecting wastewater. But if we're talking about sludge, fecal sludge, septic tanks, then we might end up collecting wastewater in trucks or sludge in trucks. So it's just a different collection service, but the way of analyzing the cost is exactly the same. Then we have the sewer treatment facility, and in the final link, we have to include either final disposal of treated water, discharge, or any reuse activity we want to implement. This might be reuse for industrial purposes, irrigation, forestry, or any other reuse activity. So in order to calculate the costs, either just for one component as treatment and reuse, or to calculate the costs of the entire sanitation value chain, I will offer you a tool. It's an online tool that we've developed with the World Bank in the last couple of years. The link is on the screen. If you type this on your browsers, you can just go into the tool. It's called CWIScostingtool.com. CWIS means Citywide Inclusive Sanitation. So this is Citywide Inclusive Sanitation Costingtool.com. And we will take a short look at the tool right now. Am I online?
We're not seeing a screen, Gustavo.
Okay. I'm looking at the wrong screen. Here we go. Sharing screen again. Okay. Now you see it, right?
Yes, we're seeing it.
So I'm typing CWIS costing tool. And as you type that, you will see the splash screen. It's in English. On this first tab, when you land there, you will see a short explanation of the tool. It basically explains that the tool's got 4 modules for 4 different analysis of cost analysis. Down here, it explains about the components of the sanitation value chain. First, the household components, then the collection and transport components, treatment components, and the use or disposal components. So the tabs on top follow the same logic. When you click on the components tab, basically you get a database of costs of different sanitation components. And these components are classified by the link of the sanitation chain they belong to. So for example, if I click on this icon of a treatment plant, then the app will filter all the components that are just treatment plants down here. And for example, let's see this. Here's urea treatment for feces and ion exchange of urine, ZOP, something like this. So this is a treatment plant for urine. And here you can see for this specific component, on the left side, the CapEx, disinfection area, solar panels for lights, toilets, access door, improvement lab, solar, blah, blah. Then on the right side, we have the OPEX, worms, electricity for a pump, fertilizer bags, ZOP, urea, water, right? And this performs exactly the same analysis we were looking at before. Here, very important, you specify the capacity of the plant. In this case, 4,500 people. Let's look at a different one. Wastewater treatment, UASB plus constructed wetlands for 10,000 people. This is similar to what we're looking at before. It's for 10,000 people. We got pumping stations, fixed screen bars, fat separation and homogenization tank, outflow and aerobic sludge blanket reactor, constructed wetlands with high-density polyethylene geomembrane, and so on. Here on the right side, technical staff, operator, regular maintenance, tools, energy, water quality monitoring. So you can just go into this tool and you can just look at all these numbers that people have already plugged in. There's also from different countries, from Nepal, Indonesia, India. Most of the Bolivia ones are mine, but these are other World Bank projects and other projects in different parts of the world. You, when you click on this, the icon of the page here, you look at the detail. And you can also export this to a PDF, clicking here on the PDF icon. If you want to create your own record for your own project, then in that case, you can sign up for the system. It'll ask for an email address and you provide a password. And with that, you can just log in anytime you want. If you're registered and you log in, then in that case, you can create these records. Otherwise, you can just look at them. If you log in, then you can create your own records, or you can go into a record and just duplicate the record, and the copy will be yours. And that copy of yours, you can just make changes, add things, modify, delete, whatever you need. So you create a new record if you want to create a record from scratch, or you you duplicate and modify an existing record if you want to start using some existing record. So this is the first level of analysis in which you enter the costs of different components. Here's cost of a septic tank, for example. So this is the other category of components. This is the on-site components at the household level, right? It's simpler, but we still have some investment costs here and also some operational costs here. So once you have the components here, you can go to the next module called systems. In this case, you assemble a full sanitation system from containment, collection, transport, treatment, reuse, using the existing costs. So here there's many different systems. Here we can look at one which is called conventional sewers for medium density population, wastewater treatment based on upflow and aerobic sludge blanket reactor. Okay, so this is a full system. This full sanitation system, in this case, this is from Bangladesh, is composed of a household connection sewer, a condominial type sewer, and a sewer treatment plant for activated sludge with a capacity of 250,000 cubic meters per day. So before we were looking at the cost of the treatment plant, just like we can see here, right? The same we have, this is the treatment plant, the same we have, the same cost analysis we have for the sewers and for the household connection. So the total cost of the system here is $25 per capita per year. This is my total annualized cost, right? So in order for this service to run the whole thing, I need $25 per capita per year, right? Part of that will go to cover the treatment cost, $8. If we want to include a reuse activity for irrigation, for example, then we include here another component, right? We should create a component of reusing sludge or irrigation with treated water. We will need another pump, sprinklers, whatever, that will come in this line for the reuse activity. And here, and the investment cost is here, right? So this is the annual equivalent cost, CapEx and OpEx. This is total cost, and the initial investment cost is here, $170 per capita. And here we can see a graph to see the participation of each link of the sanitation chain in the total cost, and also which part of that cost is CapEx and OpEx for each of the components. So that's what this tool does. There's a couple of, there's two more modules. this is more to plan for citywide services, right? So the first two modules, you just determine the costs, which is what we're learning today. But then you can use these other two tabs to plan which sanitation solutions will be implemented for different areas of a city, for example, or for different populations, and then based on that, do some planning. For example, we have a city here, and we have different districts, and for each district we will use a different solution, and then you'll get all the costs for the entire city. But well, that's not the scope of today's presentation. Today we just want to concentrate on the costs and how to cover those costs. Right, so let's see, let's go back to the presentation. Basically, that's the first part of today's sessions, the part about calculating the cost and how to calculate this cost and the tools. And if you have any questions about this first before we move to the second part. I don't know, Janelle, if anyone has typed maybe some questions on the chat box.
Yes, good. Yes, Gustavo. All right, so Chris Corbin has asked, is there any way one can consider or incorporate, for example, reduced pollution costs, either to ecosystems, economic sectors like tourism or human health when comparing a wastewater reuse option with direct discharges to the environment?
A great question. The tool right now is performing a pure financial analysis, right? So we're just talking financial costs here. Nevertheless, if you translate the benefit of not of preventing eutrophication, for example, right, or saving fresh water, if you translate that into a cost, then you can input that cost into the tool with no problem. It will just reduce the other costs, right? So if you have energy costs, right, but then you can always add a new line saying savings on freshwater cost, for example, and you just add a negative cost there. And so yes, you can use that as a cash flow for calculating NPV. You can use that as a negative cash or a positive cash flow in this case for annual equivalent cost, or you can also use that principle for the tool. Now, as you have seen, this tool is on a beta version. On the new version that we're developing that should be out before the end of this year, we will have another tab or another module for GHG emissions, right? So just to measuring in order to include some kind of measurement of GHG emissions, but not from the financial perspective, but on the economical perspective, right? Not monetized, but just measuring cubic meters of GHG.
Thank you. There are no further questions.
Okay, so let's go for the second part, the socioeconomic and environmental sustainability of our projects, of our treatment and reuse services. First, we have to look at the cost and benefits of wastewater treatment, and then we will learn how we can develop a business model. First, we need to make sure we understand why it makes sense to invest in wastewater treatment. Is it a good business? Does it make financial sense to invest in wastewater treatment? One way of approaching this question is to understand what happens and what are the costs of not doing it. right? What happens if we don't treat wastewater and we're exposed to wastewater and we get sick? Then we need to spend a lot of money in health, for example, right? More hospitals, treatment, doctors, and so the problems we create when we don't have sanitation services generate huge costs for countries. On an average, as you can see on the screen in the purple bar, countries are losing 1.5% of their internal, I say this in English, internal product uh, in health-related costs for not having good sanitation systems. This differs from one region to another. In Africa, for example, it's much higher. Saharan Africa countries are losing 4.3% of their internal production of the entire country due to lack of sanitation. In Latin America, we're close to 1%, and the world average is 1% of the internal product being wasted due to the lack of sanitation. So this is huge amount of money, right? So the benefit of investing in sanitation is really high, and how much money you can save in relation to your investment is also very high. In Latin America, in the Caribbean, for every US dollar you will invest in sanitation, you will get 7.3 US dollars on the benefit side. Or this might be on savings or in benefits, but for each dollar you invest, you will get $7 back. In Asia, you will get $8 back. And on an average worldwide, you will get about 5.5 US dollar back from your $1 investment. So this comes from a worldwide cost-benefit analysis of sanitation investments. Now, how you do it may vary a lot. It might be as we have seen before when we talk about technologies, we can use different treatment trains for wastewater. We can invest in many different alternative technologies, and what we can get out of that investment depends on what we can do about implementing these different techniques or technologies. And this is where the huge opportunity of reuse comes in. If we do just the basic treatment we need for surface discharge, or just to comply with environmental flows and just to protect human health, this is the least we expect from, right? This is just safe discharge of wastewater. In that case, we're talking about 5.5 to 1 cost-benefit analysis, right? But if we go a little bit longer and we introduce some reuse activity, then we can have added benefits. For example, we can achieve some increase in production, for example, or we can avoid overexploitation of underground water. We see this a lot. If we're using wastewater from a city being used for irrigation, and this is preventing the farmers from drilling more boreholes, for example, then in that case, we're avoiding overexploitation of underground water resources. We can also achieve increased reliability, for example. If farmers depend on rain exclusively, but they also have access to treated wastewater, maybe they can plant their crops twice a year instead of only one time, right? 2 crops instead of 1. Or we could recharge aquifers, right? So all these are added benefits when we add some type of recycling or reusing activity. Then, if we capture the nutrients in the effluent of a treatment plant, we can also increase production because we're adding nutrients. or we can save on fertilizer, or we can avoid eutrophication processes in water bodies, or we can improve the soil. All those added benefits. We can produce fish also in treatment plants or after treatment plants. We can produce ethanol. There's many projects going on right now on electricity production from algae, for example. We can capture CO2. In that case, we're reducing emissions. Or we can capture biogas or methane and actually burn it and turn it into electricity, for example. So we can produce energy from treatment plants. We can do some industrial reuse, and companies might be able to pay much more per cubic meter than farmers, for example. So we can generate very good revenue stream from industrial reuse activities. And finally, if we treat wastewater to a level that can be reused for drinking water, then that's probably the highest value of all, right? And this is already being done in Brazil, in Israel, and also in the Netherlands. At least those three countries I know, they're reaching this level of treatment for reuse, for drinking water. So the main costs in reuse systems are here in the table. When we talk about wastewater generation, for example, in a hotel, for example, we want to separate gray water from black water for reuse of gray water in irrigation in the greenery spaces of the hotel. It's much easier to treat and reuse gray water than black water. So we might want to separate the flows. If we do this stream separation, we need some investment for that, right? On the collection system, the costs are in the construction, operation, and maintenance of the collection networks. This is very expensive when we talk about large systems for a city, for example. The collection network will be much more expensive than the treatment plant. On a small operation, such as a small neighborhood or a hotel, then the collection system might be cheaper than the treatment plant, for example. So this varies according to the situation and the specific cases. On the treatment plant, the same, the construction, operation, maintenance of the plant. Also, we have control and monitor the plants. We need some way of making sure that the plants are working well. We need to do some periodic analysis on the effluents, and all this generates costs. If we will perform an additional treatment for some specific reuse activity, that additional treatment will also imply additional costs. Once we have the treated effluent, maybe the reuse activity will not be at the same place. It won't be on site. In that case, we need to transport that treated effluent somewhere else. And in that case, we need maybe a storage system, pumps, pipes to move that water somewhere else. And finally, on the reuse activities, we also need to, for example, identify the quality of our effluent in order to see which type of activities this effluent is applicable to, and in that case, that classification analysis also might generate some costs. Gross domestic product, of course, that's the term GDP. I couldn't remember it at that moment. Thank you, Chris, for putting that in the chat. GDP. Here, main cost and benefits for different stakeholders. When we talk about central government, for example, if different states and the cities, they recycle their water, they reuse the water, then there's less pressure on central government to invest on huge water transfer projects, for example. If we need to pump potable water from one municipality to another, from one region to another, those costs are very, very high, and we can save on those costs when we do recycle of wastewater and or reuse of wastewater locally. For municipalities and also for water utilities, the costs are more on the investment side, on the investing on new infrastructure, for example, and also all the cost of protecting health, right? And the benefits of implementing very good treatment and reuse systems, they will save on health costs, as we have seen, but they can also, these utilities can also generate additional income, right? This additional income can make these utilities more sustainable in time, but can also reduce the cost of the tariffs, for example, right? Or they can reduce the level of subsidies if they are generating additional income by selling the treated wastewater, for example. And the final beneficiaries of treatment and reuse, on the cost side, if the effluent to be used for agricultural purposes, for irrigation, for example, is not disinfected, then that farmer cannot irrigate any crop, right? They can irrigate only specific crops. In that case, that represents a cost to the farmer, right? It's a restriction. But on the benefit side, maybe the farmer will be saving on fertilizer, for example, or that source of water can be more reliable than rain or other river or something else. Okay, so if we compare our costs versus our revenue streams, as we have seen, first we calculate our investment costs and how much money we will need every year in order to maintain these assets, right? For my capital investment. Then we need all the O&M costs. We add those two together and we have our total cost. The way I like to see this, the total annualized cost, right? Once we have that number, then we need to see how we can cover those costs, right? And this we call the 4 T's: tariff, taxes, transfers, and trade. And that's it. There's no other kind of revenue stream. So either you have to develop a tariff and then the customers will pay for that, or you might get some money from taxes or from transfers from other agencies or governmental departments or national government or whichever, or especially if you introduce some kind of reuse option, then in that case we're introducing the 4th T, which is trade, right? Some way of commercializing either the nutrients or the water or the energy you're generating after your treatment process. In the past and for the last 50 or 80 years, the sector has been more oriented towards a project approach, right? So a project approach has a starting date and an ending date, right? So we talk about the building or the implementation of a treatment plant, right? That's a project. You will build a treatment plant next year. You will start 1st of January and you will end up sometime that same year or a year later, right? That's the project approach. This is more when we think about with this project mentality, we will focus more on the initial investment. And our number one priority will be infrastructure. And usually we tend to think that it's better to do everything at once, the bigger the better, right? Huge treatment plants or huge water production facilities, right? Sometimes we think the bigger the better, or economies of scale, right? That's our priority when we work under this project approach. I suggest we move towards a more service-oriented approach, in which we will be more concerned with long-time sustainability. So it's not a project that will start today and finish a couple of years later, but we are developing services that should be sustainable in time, on the long term. So instead of worrying too much about the initial investment, we should be aware of the recurring costs. How much will it cost to operate the plant, right? There are hundreds and thousands of wastewater treatment plants in Latin America and the Caribbean which are not operational. So the investment is there, the money is there, the loans are there in the infrastructure, in the facilities, but those facilities are not operational, or they are operating not at their capacity. So a lot of money wasted there because all these programs are more concerned on the investment, and they don't worry much about the OPEX, about the recurring cost, and also the capacity of the administrators, the people that will operate those infrastructures in time. So under this service approach, our number one priority should be the customers, not so much the infrastructure, but the customers and the benefit of the customers. And instead of thinking the bigger the better and big solutions for big problems, we should think about incremental investment, decentralization, modular growth. This is more flexible, and from the environmental perspective, it's also better to distribute the treatment and do it locally. So that was on the financial side, but we have to ensure we have a management structure in order to run these services and make that the financial operation to work. And basically, this management needs to perform basically three different options. The management model can be private, can be public, can be a mix. That's not really the question here. Either public or private, at least the management should comply with three very important functions. First of all, the ownership function. It sounds very obvious, but we need owners for this type of infrastructures. And sometimes they are not owned by anyone. Sometimes the central government builds a treatment plant for a community, for a small community or for a small municipality, and then the treatment plant is just sitting there and it's not working, it's not operational, and nobody claims ownership of that plant. So the ownership function is the most important one. And then comes the operation and maintenance function. This is the daily operation and maintenance activities for that plant to operate. Sometimes it can be the same institution who owns the infrastructure that performs the O&M, and that's fine. But when we talk about smaller plants, decentralized approach, then that's not necessarily the case. Many plants can be operated by a different institution, for example. There's a very interesting example in Spain. In Spain, many municipalities are very small, and there is this one public entity who operates about 80 small municipal plants. So the ownership function of these plants is carried on by the municipalities. The small municipalities own these plants that are maybe for 5,000 people, 10,000 people, very small plants, or 1,000 people. But this other public institution operates all these 40 plants, and you have less than 10 people operating 40 treatment plants on behalf of the owners, which are the small municipalities. And then you have a technical function. The difference between the technical function and the O&M function is that the technical function is more of an engineering function, evaluate the plant, do the monitoring, follow up with the O&M people, making sure the infrastructure is being properly operated, right? So if we get at least these three functions properly implemented and going on, then there's a very good chance our system will be sustainable in time. So in brief, the ownership function includes has the provision mandate of the service provision mandate, and the owner of the infrastructure is the one who must ensure the sustainability over time and all the asset maintenance. The technical function is about performance monitoring, problem solving, increase of capacity, technical reports, and O&M is about daily operations, registration and reporting of activities, maintenance of indicators, and supply all the inputs we need for the plant to run every day. In order for these processes to be sustainable in time, as we have seen before, we need to match our costs to our income revenue. And a good way of looking at this is looking at this as a business model, right? Not because we're going to make necessarily a lot of money, but in order to make it sustainable, because businesses are sustainable. And so our definition for business model here is that a business is defined by the customers it serves, the market in which it operates, the allies, the cost, the revenue streams, activities that are carried out, and how added value is created and delivered to the customer. So this is what I meant before when I say we should focus on the customer, on the benefit we can provide, right? So there's a very nice tool for this. It's called the Canvas business model tool. This is the classic one, the basic model. There's just yesterday, somebody from the GIS had also sent me a newer model in which we can include more components to this Canvas model for circular economy and additional benefits like the ones Chris was mentioning before, which is very interesting. But if just looking at the basic one, we can also create a business model. First, we need a value proposition. What kind of value we're creating and for whom, right? For whom that's our clients, right? How are we going to reach those clients? Who are my clients? That's my market segments, and how I'm going to reach them. Those are the channels to get to my clients. And my clients or customers or users will generate these revenue streams. Now, this revenue stream can come fully from the users and customers, but it can also come from any other place, right? Those are the 4 T's there. It can be taxes, tariff, transfers, etc. In order to provide my customers with this value proposition, I need to perform some activities, right? And in order to perform those activities, I will need some resources. And if I don't have all the resources I need, then I need to work with some allies. And all these activities and resources and allies will generate some costs. And I have to match these costs to my revenue stream in order to make them compatible and make my business sustainable. So let's look at one quick example of this business model. You can see a treatment plant on the left and some maize being irrigated with the treated effluent. So how is that business model conceived like? The value proposition is for the client or the end customer is constant and reliable flow of water for irrigation, which allows farmers 2 planting instead of 1 per year, right? So farmers that were used to plant only 1 time and get the crop only once a year, now they can have twice a year because this water source is very reliable. Okay, that's my value proposition. Who are my customers? Are farmers located within 2 kilometers of around the treatment plants. Those are my customers. Farmers that are further away are not my customers. So I have to define who's going to benefit from this value proposition. How am I reaching the customers? Through an association of irrigation farmers. My relations are based on an agreement. This is a municipal plant, so there's an agreement between the Farmers Association and the municipality, and our relationship is framed within that agreement. I'm generating this kind of revenue stream, $40,000 per year from selling water for irrigation, $20,000 per year comes from a tariff that as a municipality, I'm charging the people for sewer services, and I'm getting $10,000 per year from a government transfer as a environmental protection incentive, because wastewater was going to the river before I, as a municipality, I've implemented this treatment plant, and there's this incentive of $10,000 per year I'm getting from a different level of the government, let's say central government. Well, the activities, I have to treat water, I have to monitor, I have to pump water, I have to take this water all the way to my farmer's land, to my customer's land. Then I need all the resources for that, like pumping stations, for example, and my allies are the farmer associations in this case, and the university, which is monitoring the efficiency of the treatment plant. All these activities are generating costs. My annual equivalent cost is $60,000 per year. This includes CapEx and OpEx. And as you can see, in this case, I'm able to cover these costs. So again, maybe not all the costs will come from the customers, but I have to rely on other streams such as tariff, or I can have some kind of subsidy also, right, from other agency or from the municipality or whichever. So this is a basic model. This is another tool that is available for conceiving any kind of business model. In this case, for treatment and reuse, we can use it as well in order to plan and devise our project. So, right, that was the second part of the presentation. Janelle, if we have any questions, maybe on the chat box, the presentation and the tools and some other resources and links are in this link you see on the screen, or they will be uploaded probably today or tomorrow to this address.
No questions in the chat.
Okay, great. Hopefully this will be useful for you all, and you can reach me anytime. Here I have this presentation will be uploaded to the site, as I mentioned before. Then you have all the links to the tools and to the resources, and you also have my email address here if you want to. Several people have been emailing me in the last sessions for specific questions. You can always do that as well. With that, Janelle, that will be my part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gustavo. Thank you. Okay, before we close, we'd like to remind all participants to fill out the second survey according to the instructions on Gustavo's slide or within the chat. We will allow 2 to 3 minutes for this important task to be completed before we go ahead and close the session. Thank you.